The sickly sweet scent of disinfectant couldn't mask the tension hanging in the hospital corridor. I lingered outside room 342, my hand frozen on the medication cart, as my husband's voice drifted through the partially open door. Everything's arranged. She won't suspect a thing until it's too late. My name is Eliana, and after 19 years of marriage, I'd never heard that tone in Ronald's voice before. Calculated, cold, almost predatory. The transfer should be complete by Friday, he continued. Once the paperwork's filed, she'll have no legal recourse. Trust me, I've covered every angle. The cart's wheels squeaked as I shifted my weight. My hands trembled as I pretended to reorganize supplies, straining to catch every word. A patient call light flashed at the end of the hall, but for the first time in my 15 years as a nurse, I ignored it. Martha's divorce left her vulnerable. Perfect timing, really. And Marie, well, teenagers are easy to manipulate when they're angry at their parents. My sister and my daughter. The two people I'd been desperately trying to protect since Martha's marriage imploded 6 months ago. The medication vials clinked as my fingers tightened around the cart handle. Mother's already on board. She doesn't know the details, but she'll back my play. She always does. Of course my mother would side with Ronald. She'd worshipped him since the day he'd walked into our lives, the successful businessman who'd swept her eldest daughter off her feet. If she only knew what I'd discovered in the past few weeks. The missing funds from our joint accounts, the secret meetings, the whispered phone calls. Austin's keeping Marie distracted. Smart kid, knows exactly what to say to keep her mind off what's happening at home, worth every penny I'm paying him. My daughter's tutor, the charming young man I'd trusted to help with her college preparations. The betrayal burned in my throat like acid. Footsteps approached the door. I pushed the cart forward, trying to appear busy as Ronald emerged, phone still pressed to his ear. He paused when he saw me, his practiced smile sliding into place. Gotta go, he said into the phone. Important meeting. He ended the call, tucking the phone into his suit pocket. Sweetheart, what are you doing on this floor? I thought you worked in pediatrics. Covering a shift for Marvin, I said, forcing myself to meet his eyes. His mother's in hospice? Always the helpful one. He kissed my cheek, his cologne overwhelming. Don't work too late. Marie's making dinner tonight. I watched him stride away, his expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum. My daughter cooking dinner? Marie hadn't set foot in our kitchen since she'd started spending time with Austin 3 months ago. The call light was still blinking. I pushed the cart toward it, my mind racing. Whatever Ronald was planning, he'd wrapped our entire family into his scheme. My sister, my daughter, my mother. Even Marie's tutor was involved. In the supply closet, I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called the one person I could still trust. Marvin, I need your help. My voice cracked. Remember when you said something felt off about Ronald's investment proposal for the hospital pension fund? I think I just found out why. The line went quiet for a moment. What do you need? He finally asked. Access to the hospital's financial records. And I hesitated, knowing this request would change everything. I need you to help me destroy my husband before he destroys our family. Another pause. Come to my office after your shift. Bring everything you've found so far. I ended the call and leaned against the metal shelving, my heart pounding. The game Ronald was playing had rules I didn't understand yet, but I was done being a pawn. It was time to become a player. The call light blinked again, more urgent now. I straightened my scrubs and took a deep breath. First, I had patients to care for. Then, I had a family to save. The financial records spread across Marvin's desk told a story of calculated deception. Each transaction, each transfer painted a clearer picture of Ronald's scheme. But it was my sister's text that made my blood run cold. Marie's not at my place, Martha wrote. She said she was staying with me tonight. I gripped the edge of Marvin's desk. I need to go. Wait. Marvin's hand hovered over a document. Look at these timestamps. The transfers to Austin's account started 3 months ago, right when Marie's grades began slipping. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. That's when I hired him as her tutor. $2,000, weekly payments. Marvin tapped the screen. That's not tutoring money. My phone buzzed again. Martha. Found her. She's at that new cafe on 5th with Austin. Keep watching them, I texted back. I'm on my way. The cafe was packed with evening customers when I arrived. Through the window, I spotted my sister hunched in a corner booth, pretending to read a magazine. 3 tables away, Marie sat with Austin, her face animated as she gestured with her hands. The same way I used to at her age, when everything felt possible and adults were just obstacles to be overcome. She's been here an hour, Martha whispered as I slid into her booth. He keeps showing her something on his phone. She looks Excited. I studied Austin's body language, the calculated way he leaned forward, how his eyes darted to the door every few minutes. Has Ronald called? Twice. I covered for her. Martha's fingers drummed against her coffee cup. Eliana, there's something else. Elijah called me this morning. The mention of her ex-husband's name made me turn. What did he want? He asked about Ronald, specific questions about his business practices, his partners. She lowered her voice. He said he's been investigating him for months, that Ronald's involved in something bigger than we realize. At Marie's table, Austin stood suddenly, heading toward the restroom. His phone lay face up on the table. Watch my purse, I said, standing. Eliana, don't... But I was already moving, timing my path to intersect with Marie's table. My daughter's eyes widened as I approached. Mom, what are you... I snatched Austin's phone, my fingers flying over the screen before it could lock. Messages, recent calls, photos. Hey! Austin's voice cut through the cafe chatter. What do you think you're doing? The last opened message thread caught my eye, from Ronald. Keep her occupied, whatever it takes. Marie grabbed for the phone. Mom, stop it! You're embarrassing me! I held the device out of reach, scrolling frantically. More messages appeared. Dates, times, instructions. A photo of bank documents. My signature forged. Austin reached us, his charm replaced by something harder. Mrs. Eliana, that's private property. Like the property you're helping my husband steal? The words came out sharp enough to draw stares from nearby tables. The tutoring was just a cover, wasn't it? What's he paying you to manipulate my daughter? Marie stood so quickly her chair toppled. He's not manipulating me. Austin's the only one who actually listens to me, who treats me like an adult. Marie. But she was already pushing past me, tears streaming down her face. Austin moved to follow her. I grabbed his arm. Touch my daughter again, and I'll make sure every college in the state knows what kind of tutor you really are. His mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. Careful, Eliana. You don't want to make an enemy of your husband's friends. Martha appeared at my side as Austin retrieved his phone and left. Marie took off toward the bus stop. Want me to follow her? I shook my head, watching my daughter's retreating figure through the window. She'll go home. She has to keep up appearances for Ronald. What are you going to do? The cafe's overhead lights flickered, casting strange shadows across the empty table where my daughter had sat, plotting with my enemies. I'm going to talk to Elijah. If he's been investigating Ronald, he must have found something we can use. Be careful, Martha warned. Elijah's not exactly stable since the divorce. Neither am I. I gathered my purse, my mind already racing ahead to the next move in this dangerous game. Not anymore. The hospital's administrative files filled Marvin's computer screen, each document more damning than the last. My hands trembled as I read the numbers. Pension funds diverted, investment accounts drained, employee savings vanished into shell companies. Ronald's been systematically stealing from the hospital for years, Marvin said, his voice tight. But here's where it gets worse. He pulled up another document. Your signature's on half these authorizations. That's impossible. I know you didn't, but someone did. He pointed to a date. This one was signed while you were in surgery with that trauma case last month, remember? The 6-hour procedure? The room seemed to tilt sideways. He's setting me up to take the fall. There's more, Marvin hesitated. The board's launching an investigation. Your name's already been flagged. A knock at the office door made us both jump. The handle turned before we could respond, and my mother's caregiver stepped in. Jason? I straightened. What are you doing here? Your mother sent me. His usually calm face was etched with concern. She needs you at the house, now. I can't just... Ronald's there, he cut in, with Marie. The drive to my mother's house was a blur. Jason's car weaved through traffic as he spoke in low tones. They arrived an hour ago. Ronald was agitated, started talking about moving assets, protecting the family. Your mother seemed confused, but she kept agreeing with everything he said. And Marie? Silent, wouldn't look at anyone. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. There's something else. A man showed up just before I left, said his name was Elijah. Martha's ex-husband. My chest tightened. What did he want? Don't know. Your mother wouldn't let him in, but he said he'd wait. The scene at the house was worse than I'd imagined. Elijah stood in the driveway, arguing with my mother. Ronald's voice boomed from inside. Marie sat on the front steps, her face buried in her phone. You have no right to be here, my mother shouted at Elijah. Haven't you caused enough damage? Show her the papers, Elijah called when he saw me. Show her what her precious son-in-law's been doing with her foundation's money. Ronald appeared in the doorway. Eliana, don't listen to him. He's trying to destroy our family. Like you destroyed mine? Elijah advanced. Tell them how you really made your fortune. Tell them about the families you bankrupted. Mom? Marie's voice cracked. What's happening? I moved toward my daughter, but Ronald got there first. Go inside, sweetheart. This doesn't concern you. Everything concerns her, I said, including what you're paying Austin to do. The color drained from Ronald's face. Behind him, my mother gasped. You're all being manipulated, Ronald recovered quickly. Elijah's bitter about his divorce. He's turning you against me. The offshore accounts, Elijah interrupted. The forged documents, the missing pension funds. Should I keep going? Marie stood suddenly. Austin said you were helping him start a business. That's what the money was for. Marie, Ronald reached for her. Don't touch her. The words came out like ice. Don't you dare touch our daughter. Silence fell. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Show them, Elijah pressed. Show them what I found. I pulled out my phone, opened the files Marvin had sent. Mother, look at these. Really look. But my mother backed away. I don't want to see anything he's given you. Ronald's protected this family. He's been stealing from you for years, Jason spoke up. Everyone turned. He stepped forward, pulled an envelope from his jacket. I've been watching, documenting everything. The late-night calls, the mysterious visitors, the papers he makes you sign without reading. Ronald's mask cracked. For just a moment, I saw the truth. The desperation, the fury, the fear. Marie, I said softly, check your phone. The last message from Austin. She did. Her face crumpled as she read. I trusted you, she whispered to Ronald. Then she ran inside. This isn't over, Ronald snarled, but his eyes darted between faces, calculating odds, measuring loyalty. No, I agreed. It's just beginning. The front door slammed as Elijah stepped closer, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Should I tell them about Singapore, or shall you? Ronald's face went ash gray. Whatever Singapore meant, it was the key to everything. And suddenly I knew, this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about survival. The Singapore files lay scattered across Elijah's kitchen table like pieces of a shattered mirror, each fragment reflecting a different angle of Ronald's deception. 3 companies dissolved overnight, Elijah said, tapping a document. 48 employees left without severance. 1 man lost everything, his house, his savings. 2 weeks later, he drove his car off a bridge. My throat tightened. And Ronald? Walked away with millions, the same pattern he's using now with the hospital pension fund. He slid another paper forward. But here's what makes it personal. Martha's trust fund was part of that deal. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. Outside, rain peppered the windows, distorting the streetlights. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because Ronald's about to do it again, but this time... Elijah's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening. Your mother's called an emergency family meeting, tonight. My own phone lit up with the message. Dinner at 7, attendance mandatory, my mother's way of maintaining the illusion of control. She's choosing sides, I said. She already has. Elijah gathered the papers. Ronald's convinced her to transfer her estate into a new trust, one he controls. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Through the rain-streaked glass, I recognized Jason's silhouette. Your mother sent me to fetch you, he said when I opened the door. His eyes darted to Elijah, then back to me. But there's something you need to know first. He pulled out his phone, played a recording. My mother's voice, thin with anxiety. The Singapore deal wasn't supposed to hurt anyone. Ronald promised. When was this? I demanded. Last night. She talks in her sleep sometimes. Mentions dates, names. Jason lowered his voice. She knew about Singapore before it happened. She helped Ronald set it up. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. My own mother, complicit in destroying lives, including her younger daughter's future. There's more, Jason continued. Austin visited her yesterday morning. They talked about Marie's college fund. My hands curled into fists. She wouldn't dare. She already has. Elijah held up another document. The transfer was completed this morning. Ronald now controls every penny of Marie's education money. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. The tutoring, the late-night meetings, Austin's manipulation. It was all about isolating Marie, ensuring she'd side with Ronald when everything fell apart. My phone buzzed again. Martha. Marie's missing. Austin's not answering his phone. The world tilted sideways. I steadied myself against the doorframe. I know where they'll be, Elijah said, grabbing his keys. The same place Ronald took his victims in Singapore. Somewhere public, somewhere they can't make a scene while he explains how this is all for their own good. The drive to the art museum was tense with unspoken fears. We found them in the East Wing, Ronald, my mother, Austin, and Marie. My daughter's face was streaked with tears as Ronald gestured at something on his tablet. "Just sign here, sweetheart," he was saying. "It's the only way to protect your future. The only thing she needs protection from is you." My voice carried across the empty gallery. Ronald's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing raw fury before smoothing into concern. "Eliana, you're not thinking clearly. Tell her, Gabrielle. Tell her how we're trying to help." My mother stepped forward, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. "Sometimes love means making difficult choices." "Like Singapore?" The words hit their mark. My mother stumbled back. "Jason recorded everything, Mother, every guilty whisper, every confession." Marie looked between us, confusion turning to understanding. "What's Singapore?" "Ask your grandmother," Elijah said quietly. "Ask her about the man who died because of their difficult choices." Austin moved toward Marie, but I was faster. "Touch her, and every recording, every document goes public. Your promising future ends right here." "Marie," Ronald tried one last time. "You know I only want what's best." "What you want," I cut in, "is control. But it's over. The hospital board knows everything. The police will too once they see what Elijah found." The tablet slipped from Ronald's hands, clattering on the marble floor. In the shattered screen, I caught my reflection and saw something I hadn't noticed before. I was smiling. The dining room in my mother's house felt like a stage set for a Greek tragedy. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light, throwing prismatic shadows across faces that had become unrecognizable to me. Ronald sat at the head of the table, my mother to his right, both wearing expressions of practiced concern. "You're being unreasonable," my mother said, cutting her meat with precise movements. "Ronald has always protected this family." Marie pushed her food around her plate. The bruise on her wrist, from when she'd fallen earlier that afternoon, was darkening to purple. An accident that happened moments after she'd tried to tell me something about Austin. "Protection shouldn't leave bruises," I said. Ronald's fork clinked against his plate. "That was unfortunate, but if she hadn't been running—" "From what?" Martha interrupted. "What exactly was my niece running from?" The air crackled with tension. Jason moved silently around the table, refilling water glasses, his presence a reminder of everything he'd overheard. "Marie," Ronald's voice softened dangerously, "why don't you tell them about the scholarship opportunity Austin found for you, the one in Singapore?" My daughter's face went pale. I haven't decided." "It's already arranged," my mother cut in. "The paperwork just needs signatures." The room tilted sideways. Singapore. Always Singapore. "She's 17, I said. "She can't leave the country without my consent." "Actually," Ronald pulled out a folder, "as her legal guardian—" "What did you say?" "The papers you signed last month for Marie's college fund?" He smiled. "They included a transfer of guardianship. Temporary, of course, just until she turns 18. Martha's glass shattered in her grip, blood mixed with water on the white tablecloth. "You forged those papers," I whispered. "Prove it." Ronald's mask slipped, revealing something reptilian beneath. "Your signatures on everything. The hospital transfers, the trust documents, even the Singapore arrangements. Who do you think they'll believe? The respected businessman or the unstable nurse who's been making wild accusations?" "Tell them," Marie suddenly burst out, "tell them what Austin really—" The crash came from behind me. I turned to see Jason sprawled on the floor, a serving tray overturned beside him. Marie screamed. "He's having a seizure!" my mother cried. But I'd seen seizures. This wasn't one. Jason's eyes found mine as he convulsed, trying to form words. "Call an ambulance!" Martha grabbed her phone. "No!" Ronald stood. "I'll take him. My car's faster." "Don't!" Jason gasped. "The drink, he—" Understanding hit like a thunderbolt. I lunged for Marie's untouched water glass, but Ronald was faster. It shattered against the wall. "Mother," I said quietly, "what did you let him do?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sometimes sacrifices—" "Sacrifices?" Martha's voice rose hysterically. "Like Singapore? Like that man who died?" Marie stood so quickly her chair toppled. "What man? What are you talking about?" "Your grandfather," Jason managed, his breathing labored. "Tell her about her grandfather." The color drained from my mother's face. Ronald moved toward Jason, but Marvin, who'd been silent until now, blocked his path. "The ambulance is coming," Martha said, "and the police." "You've lost control," I told Ronald, "of everything." His laugh was hollow. "Have I? Marie's still legally under my guardianship. The hospital board still has evidence of your fraud. And now a tragic accident at a family dinner." He glanced at Jason. "Stress can do terrible things to people." "Marie," I said, not taking my eyes off Ronald. "Get your things. You're leaving with Martha." "She's not going anywhere." Ronald's hand closed around Marie's arm. "Tell them, sweetheart, tell them how happy you are about Singapore." My daughter looked at me, then at the bruise on her wrist, then at Jason still gasping on the floor. Something shifted in her eyes. "You're right," she said quietly. "I should tell them everything." Sirens wailed in the distance. Ronald's grip tightened. "I should tell them about the recordings," Marie continued. "The ones Austin didn't know I was making. Every meeting, every threat, every promise about Singapore." She pulled out her phone. "Should we play them now?" The look on Ronald's face made me realize he wasn't the only one who could orchestrate a staged catastrophe. The hospital's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows as I watched Jason fight for his life through the ICU window. The doctors had confirmed what I already knew: targeted poisoning, carefully dosed to look like natural causes. "He's stabilized," Marvin said, joining me, "but the police want to know why you delayed calling the ambulance." My hands curled into fists. "They think I was involved?" "Ronald's been talking to them, suggesting things." He hesitated. "The board suspended you pending investigation." A nurse I'd worked with for 10 years walked past, averting her eyes. My reputation, my career, everything I'd built, dissolving like sugar in rain. My phone buzzed. Martha. "Marie's gone." The world tilted sideways. "What?" "She went to get her laptop from the house. Austin was waiting. They left together 20 minutes ago." The memory of Marie's bruised wrist flashed through my mind. "Track her phone." "Already tried. It's off. But Elijah says he knows where Austin takes his targets. Some warehouse by the industrial park." "Don't move. I'm coming." But as I turned to leave, 2 police detectives blocked my path. "Mrs. Eliana," the older one said, "we need to discuss the incident at your mother's house and some concerning financial transactions." "My daughter's missing." "We know. Your husband's already filed a report. Claims you've been unstable, making threats." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps. Through the ICU window, Jason's monitors beeped steadily, each sound a reminder of how Ronald had nearly killed him to keep him quiet. "Check his water glass," I said. "From the dinner. Check Jason's blood work. You'll find—" "The evidence has been contaminated," the younger detective cut in. "Your mother's housekeeper already cleaned everything up, on Ronald's instructions." Of course she had. Ronald never left loose ends. My phone buzzed again, an unknown number. The message contained one image, a photograph I'd never seen before. My mother, 20 years younger, standing beside a man I recognized from the Singapore files. The man who'd died. Below it, text appeared. "Ask your mother who really killed your father." The timestamp showed it came from Marie's phone. "I need to go," I told the detectives. "Now. If you leave the hospital, we'll have to—" Marvin stepped between us. "I'm invoking medical privacy laws. This conversation is over until her lawyer arrives." "They're taking Marie to Singapore," I said once we were alone. "Ronald's recreating his old pattern. But this time—" I showed him the photo. His face went gray. "Your father's car accident. It wasn't an accident? Apparently not." The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. That's why my mother always supported Ronald. He helped her hide something. "Where are you going?" "To the warehouse. Martha and Elijah are meeting me." "The police will follow you." "Let them." I touched the ICU glass one last time. "Jason risked everything to protect Marie. I won't let that be for nothing." But in the parking lot, my mother waited beside my car. "You can't stop this," she said. "Some secrets have to stay buried." "Like what really happened to my father?" She flinched. "You don't understand." "I understand that you and Ronald murdered my father. That you've been helping him destroy lives ever since. That now you're helping him take my daughter. To protect her, Singapore is safe, far from all this mess you're creating. The last time Ronald sent someone to Singapore, they died. Your father was weak. He would have ruined everything, just like you're trying to do now." She pulled out her phone. "One call, and those detectives arrest you. Marie goes to Singapore with Austin, clean slate." And if I back off? Then maybe we can discuss arrangements, supervised visits once she's settled. The hospital lights cast my mother's shadow long and dark across the pavement. In it, I saw every lie, every manipulation, every moment she'd chosen Ronald's schemes over her own children. You know what's funny? I said quietly. I actually recorded that entire conversation, just like Marie recorded Austin. I guess it runs in the family. Her face contorted. She reached for her phone, but I was already moving. Behind her, Marvin appeared with the detectives. I'll tell them everything, she hissed as they approached. Good. I got into my car. Start with Singapore. I'm sure they'd love to hear about my father's accident. In the rearview mirror, I watched them lead her away. One betrayal exposed. But Marie was still out there, and time was running out. The warehouse loomed against the twilight sky, its broken windows reflecting the last traces of sunlight. Martha's car was already parked outside, Elijah standing guard beside it. Third floor, he said as I approached. Ronald's waiting with Austin. They have Marie. The police? 10 minutes out, but... He hesitated. There's something else. The Singapore files. They weren't just about money laundering. They were about human trafficking. Young girls sent overseas as students. The bruise on Marie's wrist flashed through my mind. That's why he wanted guardianship. Eliana, Martha emerged from the shadows. Jason's awake. He told the police everything. About Mother, about Dad's accident, about Ronald's operation. Then we end this. Now. The warehouse stairs creaked under our feet. Each step brought back memories. My father's smile, my mother's lies, Ronald's calculated manipulation of everyone I loved. We found them in what had once been an office. Marie sat in a corner, Austin's hand on her shoulder. Ronald stood by a desk covered in papers, looking almost bored. Right on schedule, he said, though I expected you sooner. It's over, I said. The police know everything, about Singapore, about the trafficking, about my father. Do they? He smiled. Or do they have the story your mother's telling them? About how you've lost your mind with paranoid delusions, how you've been threatening Marie, tampering with hospital records? I have proof. You have nothing. Every document, every recording, it all leads back to you. The perfect fall from grace. Respected nurse becomes unstable conspiracy theorist, loses everything, he gestured to Marie, including her daughter. Show her, Marie said suddenly. Ronald's smile faltered. What? Show her what you made me record, my daughter's voice trembled. The confession you forced me to make. Austin's grip tightened on her shoulder. Marie. Or I could show them this instead. She pulled out her phone. Every meeting, every threat, every detail about Singapore. About what really happened to my grandfather. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Ronald's mask cracked, revealing something feral beneath. You ungrateful little... He lunged for the phone. Several things happened at once. Austin pulled Marie back. Martha screamed. Elijah moved to intercept Ronald. And I saw the glint of metal in Ronald's hand. The gunshot echoed off concrete walls. Elijah stumbled, clutching his side. Martha ran to him as Ronald turned the gun toward Marie. The phone, he said. Now. It's already uploaded, Marie said. Everything, to every news outlet in the city, to the police, to the hospital board. You're lying. Check your phone, I said quietly. The notifications should be starting right about now. His free hand fumbled for his pocket. As his attention wavered, Austin made his move, but not the one I expected. He shoved Marie toward Ronald. We had a deal, Austin said. I deliver her to Singapore, I get my cut. You pathetic. Marie twisted away from both men. I recorded you too, every promise, every plan. Did you really think I was that naive? Sirens wailed in the distance. Ronald's composure shattered completely. You're just like your father, he snarled at me. He couldn't understand either. The bigger picture, the necessity of sacrifice. The only sacrifice, I said, was letting you into our lives. He raised the gun again, but this time Marie was ready. She threw her phone at his face as Martha tackled him from behind. The gun skittered across the floor. Austin bolted for the door, but Elijah, despite his wound, caught him with a well-placed punch. Singapore, Ronald spat as I picked up his gun. You have no idea what you've lost. The connections, the power. The only power you had, I said, was what we gave you. And now? I nodded toward the window where red and blue lights painted the warehouse walls. Now you have nothing. As the police burst in, I watched my husband's empire crumble. But it was Marie's hand slipping into mine that told me we'd truly won. Mom? She whispered. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. About the recordings. You did exactly what you needed to do. I squeezed her hand. You survived, just like I taught you. Through the broken windows, dawn began to break, the first light of a world without Ronald's shadows. The visiting room at the detention center smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Austin sat across from me, his charm replaced by something harder, more desperate. I want a deal, he said. You had your chance for deals. I placed a folder on the table. But there's something you still haven't explained, the other girls. His eyes darted to the guard by the door. I don't know what... Oh. Singapore wasn't just about Marie. Ronald's operation went back years. How many others did you help him target? Help him? Austin's laugh was brittle. You still don't get it, do you? This was my operation. Ronald was just the money man, the respectable face. I found the girls, I groomed them, He stopped, realizing too late what he'd admitted. Behind the two-way mirror, I knew the detectives were recording everything. Marie was different, he continued quickly. I actually cared. Save it for your trial, I stood. The Singapore authorities are particularly interested in your testimony. Outside, Marie waited with Martha. My daughter's face had regained its color, though the bruise on her wrist had faded to a yellowish reminder. Did he confess? She asked. To everything, including the other victims. I touched her shoulder. You saved them, you know. Your recordings, your courage, you brought down their entire network. But not without help, she glanced at Martha. Aunt Martha taught me how to hide the recordings, and Elijah is recovering well, Martha finished. The doctors say he can leave the hospital next week. We drove to the courthouse where my mother's hearing was scheduled. Jason sat on the steps, looking frail but determined. They're ready for us, he said. Inside, my mother wouldn't meet my eyes as she pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges. The judge's words washed over me. Sentences, restitution, closure. But it was my mother's final statement that cut deepest. I thought I was protecting them, she said. Like I protected myself when their father threatened to expose my affairs. Ronald promised to make it look like an accident. Marie squeezed my hand as the bailiff led my mother away. At home, our new home, bought with the recovered funds from Ronald's accounts, I found Marie in her father's old study. She held a photograph I hadn't seen in years. My father teaching me to ride a bike, his smile bright and real. Do you hate her? Marie asked. Grandmother? No. I sat beside her. Hate takes too much energy, and we need that energy for rebuilding. The police found 3 more girls, she said quietly. In Singapore. They're coming home. Because of you. Because we fought back. All of us. She traced my father's face in the photo. Do you think he'd be proud? Of us exposing a trafficking ring? Of you being brave enough to gather evidence? Of our family choosing truth over comfortable lies? I smiled. Yes, but he'd be prouder of what we do next. Which is? Live, help others. Remember that revenge isn't about destroying people, it's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. The doorbell rang. Martha stood outside with Marvin and Elijah carrying takeout containers. The hospital board called, Marvin announced as we set up dinner. They've reinstated you, with back pay and an apology. And Ronald? Martha asked, talking to prosecutors, trying to save himself. Elijah's wound made him wince as he sat. But with Austin's confession, Marie placed the last plate on the table. Mom, I've been thinking about college. Singapore's definitely off the list, I said. Actually, she straightened, I want to study criminal justice. Help other families fight back. The evening light filtered through our new windows, casting warm shadows across faces that had weathered betrayal and emerged stronger. Not unscathed, but unbroken. First rule of fighting back, I said, raising my glass. Never do it alone. To family, Martha offered. To truth, Elijah added. To justice, Marie said firmly. To all of it, I finished, and to whatever comes next. Outside, the sun set on the remnants of Ronald's empire, but inside, surrounded by the people who'd fought beside me, I finally understood. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even.